The fever burned in his face and in his eyes. He fought for what he could not understand. He struggled to gain some control over his body and his world. Saavik knew that it would fail. "So, it has come," she said to him in Vulcan. She moved closer to him, speaking quietly. "It is called Pon farr." He could not understand her words, but her tone calmed him. "Will you trust me, my mentor, my friend? I know it is no longer you," she thought, "but I will help you if I can, because of who you used to be." Hi there. I'm Chris Goodmakers, and today I'd like to talk to you about the Star Trek movies. I really wanted to start up with just a bit of a casual video this time. It's not really scripted. I do have some points I'll be looking at, but they're mostly just to help with my memory. The Star Trek films total 13 official films over, it's been 40 years now, since 1979. The first, of course, being Star Trek the Motion Picture, the last released theatrically being Star Trek Beyond. So today, I wanted to give my thoughts on some of the movies, break down kind of what order I believe they fall in terms of quality. This is going to be fairly spoiler light. I don't really want to give away any of the major twists or turns of the films. Let's take a look at the Star Trek film franchise. We're going to start with worst to best, and of course that means the absolute dishonor comes to the first film on my list, which is Star Trek Insurrection. Insurrection is the third of the TNG films. It's definitely the worst TNG film, arguably the worst of the Star Trek film franchise, the worst in terms of design. Everything is really uninspired. The villagers all wear this gray, beige coloring. It looks really cheap. They don't have any sort of alien characteristics. The set design looks like a cheap set. There's all of this plaster, and it looks like it was just built in the California Valley in an afternoon. The plot really feels like it could at most have been a two-parter on TNG, one of the lesser two-parters. It revolves around Picard being faced with a moral dilemma, which, to give it credit, it is one of the few TNG films that does have a moral dilemma at its center. But it sort of revolves around Picard having to decide if he's going to listen to Federation orders and let them forcibly remove a population of people from a planet that has these healing particles or healing gobbledygook in the rings around it that they want to suck up with a big vacuum, so that they can turn it into medicine for people. It's kind of an argument that really falls apart because the film itself shows that the natives aren't actually native. They came there on a spaceship, I think a couple hundred years ago, and have been living basically for a couple hundred years on this planet. And the particles themselves could actually be used to save hundreds or thousands of lives, as they say in the movie. And this is actually the one movie that takes place during the Dominion War, which was a rather big arc on DS9 and the biggest sort of conflict the Federation had seen in the canon since the Klingon Wars. Yeah, so even Jonathan Frakes himself said he didn't agree with Picard's decision retroactively in the movie after he made it. Even though you have F. Murray Abraham as the main villain, he is just playing to the kind of standard revenge-crazed villain that's, you know, just there to get his revenge and destroy the people that wronged him in kind of the most uninspired way. And I think the reason it's at the bottom of my list is that we only got 4 TNG movies compared to the 6, really 6.5 that we got out of the original crew. So it was a huge missed opportunity that we didn't get a movie about Q. And I feel like that if there was one movie that could have been taken out and replaced with a Q film, it would have been this one, which makes the plot on this one seem even more pointless. So yeah, Star Trek Insurrection, bottom of my list.
Accelerated hair growth is often experienced by Klingons during Jagdala.
Jagdala.
Roughly translated puberty, although for a Klingon that scarcely does it justice.
Okay, so now we move on to what is usually considered the worst of the Star Trek franchise. That would be the William Shatner directed Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. AKA, what does God need with a starship?
Excuse me, I'd just like to ask a question. What does God need with a starship?
This one is bad. Shatner doesn't really know how to direct. He shows good enough ability to get performances out of his actors, but it's really, you can really tell that this was a story that was driven by the ego of William Shatner. There's also a lot of things you can tell that the studio shoehorned in. The previous one to this was Star Trek IV, which we will talk about, which was probably the biggest success in terms of box office for the Star Trek film franchise at that point, at least. And that one was very funny. So when it came time to do a new Star Trek film, this one looking at the nature of what is God, what is regret, what are things like personal pain, and how does that contribute to what makes us who we are. The studio decided it was best to shove in a lot of zany slapstick comedy that doesn't fit with the tone that they're trying to set with the film, and certainly doesn't have the kind of funness or freshness or unexpectedness that the comedy in Star Trek IV had.
I expect that's Klingon for hello.
This one features things like Scotty banging his head on the bulkhead, or little jokes about reading out Morse code and then realizing it says "stand back."
Stand back!
What are you standing around for? Do you not know a jailbreak when you see one?
Yeah, it's Looney Tunes. This one also is incredibly ignorant to its own canon. It's just little details like the fact that the elevator shaft shows that the Enterprise they have about 70 plus decks on the Enterprise, when every single piece of canon before that shows that the Enterprise has max 24 decks. There's little things like they travel to the center of the galaxy, which should have been a journey that took decades, if not a century, according to any sort of lore about the way warp travel works. Yeah, it's a failure. It looks cheap. The special effects in this one are the worst out of any of the Star Trek films. They look the most like cheap models, bad plastic, terrible green screen. It was the first Star Trek film with special effects not done by ILM, because ILM was working, I believe, on Star Wars Jedi at the time, Return of the Jedi. They ended up going with the lowest bidder in terms of special effects contracts, which went to a special effects house that had little to no experience and little to no talent, and it really shows. There is, however, one reason this movie doesn't end up on the bottom of my list compared to Insurrection, and that's because there is actually one good core scene in this film, and it's the emotional core. So to kind of set up a bit about the plot of the fifth one, the Enterprise is hijacked.
And I'll take the ship without your help.
He is on a quest to find God at the center of the galaxy, but he also has the ability to, quote-unquote, remove people's pain through his, I believe, Vulcan telepathy, his Vulcan abilities, which essentially boils down to going in and finding a traumatic event in people's past and kind of relieving them of the guilt and pain they feel from it. The scene comes when he's trying to convince Spock, Bones, and Kirk to join his side by doing his kind of let me take away your pain magic. And it's really good. It shows two really traumatic events for both Bones and Spock. And Kirk gives a really good speech about why pain isn't something we should throw away. It's something that defines us. It's the emotional core of the film. It's the climax of the film. Unfortunately, it comes about 15 to 20 minutes before the end of the movie. But it definitely is just a little spark of Star Trek inside this mess. Okay, so number 3 on the worst Star Trek films, or at least on my list, third worst, would be Star Trek final outing of the Star Trek Next Generation crew. The final time we will see, or at least as of right now, we have seen Picard, Geordi, Data, Riker, Beverly, everybody all together in one spot on the bridge of the Enterprise. And I really, really wish it had been better.
Or you see someone that you know and they ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
I really wish that they had gotten the kind of send-off that the TOS crew had gotten. This one is dark. It is sad. Everyone seems very tired and upset. So to kind of break down the plot of this one a little bit, the Enterprise is kind of seeing an era come to an end with Riker finally being assigned captain of a new ship and getting married, and everybody's deciding to go. Worf's still there for some reason, even though as of the end of DS9 he should be doing something completely different than serving as a security officer on the Enterprise. It just kind of goes to show that, again, the problem is that they're just kind of ignoring canon on this one. But to break down the plot, the Enterprise receives a signal that there has been a coup in the Romulan government. And a Reman, who are the now suddenly invented sister race to the Romulans. And yes, I'm aware that Remus appears in the infographic in Enemy Within. I think it's Enemy Within. The really great Romulan TOS episode. But we've never seen Remans before, and now all of a sudden there are these vampire-looking race of people, monster faces, that have been horribly oppressed by the Romulan government for centuries and have risen up with a new inspiring leader, Shinzon, played by a very young Tom Hardy. Yes, this is Tom Hardy as a Star Trek villain. He could have been so much better, and it feels like if they had knew who they had, or who they would have ended up having, Tom Hardy, they would have been able to do way more with him. He comes off as the kind of dry, pseudo-British, Bond-ish bad guy who is again, bent on revenge, but for kind of a vague reason. I mean, I get that he was locked up and imprisoned and tortured and subjugated by the Romulans for decades. However, it doesn't really connect with me, and he's just kind of goofy, and his outfit is ridiculous, and the Riemann outfits are ridiculous. There is some stuff to like in Nemesis. The design of the Romulan ships is very good. I really like the Scorpions. The Scimitar is a strong ship, although a good-looking ship. The way it opens up, though, with the side wings expanding, is a little too reminiscent of what they just did from the previous film, which was the Collector from Insurrection. So we do get some good stuff there, but in the end, it's just kind of a mess. There's a dune buggy in it for no reason, because Patrick Stewart wanted to drive a dune buggy around, and I will have thoughts on that dune buggy in another video, because I have plenty of thoughts about the Argo. But yeah, at the end of this one, for the last time seeing the crew that we loved and that I essentially grew up with, it was just depressing and sad, and it's a very grim film, and not in a fun way.
In those terrible depths lived only the damned. Together with the Riemann slaves, I was condemned to an existence of unceasing labor and starvation under the brutal heel of the Romulan guards. Only the very strongest had any hope of survival. I was only a child when they took me. Then I didn't see the sun or the stars again for nearly 10 years.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it.
So now on to the fourth. This is where we start to get into some redeeming qualities. This is where we start to get into stuff that I actually did like and I can talk about. And that's why my number 4 pick from worst to best is Star Trek Into Darkness. Oh my God. So this movie is loud. It is the loudest Star Trek. There are explosions. Clear the room! Screaming. Punching. Crying. Crashing. Oh my God, we're all going to die.
No! The housings are misaligned. There's no way we can redirect the power. The ship's dead, sir. She's gone.
There's a lot of questionable decisions from JJ in this one. This is his second and last time directing in the Star Trek franchise. He very clearly wanted to move on to Star Wars. I don't understand why you would get a hold of Benedict Cumberbatch, who is a really good actor and can play a lot of unique and interesting roles, and then you turn him into shouty, punchy man who has super strength and some kind of psychotic, diabolical plan to save the lives of 127 of his closest friends, supporters, henchmen. And then you turn him into Khan.
My name is Khan.
Yeah, that's kind of the big twist of this film, if you can even call it a twist. If you have no sort of context of who Khan Noonien Singh is supposed to be, I suppose you could accept that, Cumberbatch is playing a perfectly acceptable villain. But just the sheer fact that they took a character who is established as a Sikh, played by a famously Mexican actor, and turn him into a shouty white British man who shares absolutely none of the same characteristics, none of the same qualities, none of the same style that Ricardo Montalban brought to the role. There's still a lot to like in Into Darkness. The film does kind of move from one set piece to another really strongly. The sequence where they are jumping from one starship to the other is very exciting. I really enjoy a cast of the JJ films. I think that they are mostly perfectly cast. I think that Chris Pine especially does a really good job as Kirk. I think that he is mostly written wrong, but when he's given the chance, you can really see young Shatner kind of coming through in the performance. Quinto, however, is, I wouldn't say horribly miscast, because he has the ability to be Spock, and that's very clear in certain small moments in this film and the previous one. But they don't know how to write Spock, and Spock in this film is turned into a very violent, very destructive, very angry man. And yeah, the whole plot of this one kind of, it's the J.J. Abrams style of moving so fast that you can't really kind of see the seams until you get out of it. And then once you look back, you see how much of a patchwork it is. It's really written as a sci-fi space opera action film first, which is not what traditionally has been Star Trek's strength. So yeah, Star Trek Into Darkness, that would be my number 4 on the list.
The truth is, I'm gonna miss you.
On to my number 5. That's the first TNG film, Star Trek Generations. What a clever title. Because you get it, the next generation, but this one also has Kirk, so it's 2 generations. This is the handoff film. For some reason, when you do this, there's an unspoken rule that you have to sort of steer an existing audience into a new franchise by tagging something they recognize onto it. And of course, it does seem like a natural fit, right? This is the big TNG movie. This is the thing where we're going to transition what's been successful on television for 7 years into the market of the cinema. Of course, we're going to have Picard meet Kirk. That's, that's an absolute, you can't not have that. You can't not establish a reason for Jean-Luc Picard to meet and interact with the one person he is arguably of equal status to in Star Trek lore, and that's James T. Kirk. This film does have some stuff that's really good. At times it is very wrapped up in Next Generation lore, which makes it a little unfriendly for people who had a passing interest in Star Trek, who maybe only caught some episodes here or there on television, because this was, if you can picture it, before streaming services, in a time where when something aired on television, there was a good chance you might never see it again, or at least have no way to see it again. So to take a movie like this and to really steep it in things like Picard's brother from the episode Family, to steep it in Lursa and Bator, who were a huge part of the kind of main overarching plot of The Next Generation, the Klingon political upheavals. To have the main bad guy be an Elorian, who is the same species, the first time we've seen another member of Guinan's species.
John doesn't care about weapons or power. He just cares about getting back to the Nexus.
Aren't you beginning to feel time gaining on you? It's like a predator. It's stalking you.
It all feels like a natural kind of extension of what the show is doing, but there are certain things that hold it back.
I just love scanning for life forms. Life forms. You tiny little life forms. You precious little life forms. Where are you?
Hi guys, so that's the end of part 1. I'm going to be breaking this one up into 3 parts. Part 2 I'm hoping to have up by next weekend, and part 3 will be coming very soon after that. If you like this video, please remember to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. Also leave a comment if you have any opinions about the Star Trek films, which I'm sure you do if you're watching this video. I look forward to finishing this one up, and again, I'll try to have more of a formal video, that's a little bit more written, coming the next month. Actually, I'm hoping to have a video out on a Netflix TV show that I binged very recently. But until then, guys, take care. I'm going to be back here because I've got some reading to do. Oh, so that's how they made it look like Shatner had hair.